Well, it's not easy because Oregon did not land Nick Abrams, but today I am Captain Optimism.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with all things Oregon Ducks. Evaluating Tosh Lupoi's run so far as defensive coordinator, which has had some highs. It has had some less highs, but it's had some highs. We're optimism. It's all optimism today. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's all on today's show. But we start with another, we can call it a recruiting miss if we would like. Oregon does not land Nick Abrams. They were a finalist for 2 linebackers this week. Abrams went to Georgia. I was expecting him to go there. I thought they might have had potentially a better shot for Tyler Atkinson, especially given that he wound up going to Texas. I definitely think that in retrospect, but the fact of the matter is, Oregon did not get either one of those 2 players. Now, I was not expecting Oregon to get either one of those 2 players, so I was really hoping, I always hope, there's expectations and there is hope. I was hoping they'd pull a rabbit out of the hat. Lo and behold, the Ducks did not do that. So where do they go next? If things continue the way that people in the industry have predicted them to, and we don't have necessarily exact timelines for all the players that Oregon is still after, they'll be all right. They'll be just fine. Prince Tavazon, 2027 defensive lineman, will reclassify. That might bump the class back into the top 10. If they land Devon Benjamin, I would feel pretty darn good about that. And Oregon's hot defensive back recruiting would be really, really high. But certainly it has been, since the 4th of July, a cold spell relative to what happened around the 4th of July when Oregon landed 3 recruits in about 20 hours or so. Rough. It might not even have been 20. It might have been 16 hours. That was, of course, never going to sustain itself. But I'm going Captain Optimism here. I'm not spelling doom and gloom on today's show. I'm not talking about how Oregon can't recruit this position, how Oregon missed another, how Oregon did. Yeah, I would have liked for them to have gone out and got one of those 2 linebackers, sure. But I'm going to go through and give you my 3 favorite players, pronounced correctly, in the class of 2026 that Oregon has right now. So, number 1, it's hard to go past Emmanuel Ihanacho, which is how he pronounced it on the Pat McAfee show. So, Ihanacho is one of the top 2 or 3, depending on which services you look at. My everydayers know I'm a 24/7 guy. He's number 2 offensive tackle in the class. Hard to not like a guy, 6'6 and a half, 345 pounds. The expectations for him should be really sky high. There's still a raw element to his game. Brian talked about that when he committed. This is someone who, as a true freshman, though, has a legitimate chance to make an impact. Maybe that's in the Josh Connerly role. Maybe that's just starting. Oregon's offensive line next year should, once again, look very different than it will this year, because you're going to have Isaiah World off to the NFL draft, Emmanuel Prenon, Matthew Bedford. They're not going to have any eligibility left unless they can get some waivers somewhere, but I think they've run out of those sorts of things. Like, it's going to be, heck, you might be looking for a new center if Poncho pops off. So the opportunity for him to play as a true freshman is very real. Big body, athletic frame for a guy of his size, and I'll just say he's rated higher coming out of high school than Penei Sewell. You make of that information whatever you would like. But Ihanacho is a guy that Duck fans should be excited about. And you never know. Whenever you play the recruiting game, there's a crapshoot element to it where you look at rankings on paper, you look at an entire class, and you're kind of sifting through trying to figure out where, the 5 to 7 truly high impact guys are. And it's not necessarily possible to know, even based on the recruiting ranking. So, Ihanacho is definitely my favorite recruit that Oregon has in this cycle. Number 2, Kendra Harrison. So, I'm interested to see if Harrison winds up playing tight end and on the basketball team. I know he's going to play tight end for the Ducks. And he represents a physical frame that Oregon actually doesn't currently have at the tight end position. Kenyon Sadiq is 6'4". Kendra Harrison is 6'7", and is a higher rated prep recruit coming out of high school than even Kenyon Sadiq was. And think about how excited you are to watch Kenyon Sadiq this year as Oregon's tight end 1. I think he's going to have he could have one of the best seasons in the history of Oregon football tight ends. Like, that's right there on the table. If he then goes to the NFL, you've got a void for tight end 1 going into 2026. Certainly Jamari Johnson would be a candidate to fill it, but true freshman playing at tight end, a lot easier than plenty of other position groups. So Harrison is a guy, partially because of his ability to play early on, but also because of his physical profile, I'm really excited to see. Like, this Sadiq and then Harrison represent a pretty sizable shift in the caliber of athlete Oregon brings at a position that they've historically been really good at. Ed Dixon, David Paulson, Johnny Munt, like Farrell Brown, Terrence Ferguson, of course. Keep going down the list. I know I didn't name them all. Like, that position has sneakily been a really good one for the Ducks, and Harrison has a chance to be a great one. And then the next one, look, this is partially because of non-football stuff, but I think that's going to translate to football stuff. How can you not like Tristan Phillips? How can you not? I said favorite. I didn't say most exciting. I didn't say highest potential. I said favorite. Now, these all get factored into my calculation, my 3 favorite players in the class right now for the Ducks. But man, Tristan Phillips just going 10 toes down and knee deep into the Oregon-Washington rivalry before he's even on campus kind of overshadows the fact he is a tremendously talented football player. 6'3", 215 pounds, 24/7's got him as one of the top 12 linebackers in the country. And of course, without Atkinson or Nick Abrams in the fold, I think his importance for this particular recruiting class becomes magnified because suddenly he looks like the only guy. Oregon hasn't been closely tied to another linebacker in the class of 2026. Now, just 2 weeks really before Bryson Beaver committed to the Ducks, you would have said they weren't tied to any other quarterbacks except for Ryder Lyons and Matt Ponatoski, and then all of a sudden the Bryson Beaver situation came about. He's a Duck, and that dude's got plenty of arm talent to start a quarterback one day. So things can certainly change quickly on that front, but I have not seen or heard anything with regards to Oregon adding another linebacker from the prep ranks in this class. So yeah, Phillips is a guy that is really rangy, good size at 6'3", plays sideline to sideline, and just looks like a really complete football player. And once he gets a chance to go up against the Dogs, I tell you what, it's going to be really, really fun. So let me know who your 3 favorite players are, because those are mine. And I like all these guys. It's hard to not. There have not been a lot of high school recruits whose film I've watched, who I've talked to people about, that I don't look at and say, I see how he's a starting caliber player for the Ducks one day. They don't all work out that way. But those would be, given loose criteria, my 3 favorite players in Oregon's 2026 recruiting class. Who are your 3 favorites? Drop them in the YouTube comments, hit me up on Twitter, all that good stuff. Let's talk about Oregon's defensive coordinator, and then later, Oregon's offensive coordinator. First, this episode brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports, they are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? Seriously, why not? What are you waiting for? FanDuel allows you to get in on the game while your friends are busy getting sunburned at the beach. And if you want to bet anything Oregon-related, you can, including individual games. Oregon against Indiana, Ducks minus 14.5. Oregon against USC, Ducks minus 13.5. Oregon at Penn State, Ducks plus 4.5. Which is right about where I thought I would be. As I pointed out to Zach Sako of Locked On Nittany Lions, whatever you want, FanDuel's got it. If you are new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Let's have us talk about Oregon's defensive coordinator. Mailbag is wide open, very available. So is Spencer's scale of agreement. You send in a take. I give you 1 to 10 where I stand on my scale of agreement there. So this question came from Skirt Mayo. How would you rate Tosh Lupoi's tenure at Oregon, and is he the guy in the long term if he doesn't leave? I don't think he's leaving. I've talked several times just in the last couple of weeks about coaches that could not be on Oregon staff within the next couple of years. Will Stein and Chris Hampton, and frankly, I think Hampton could be first. Those two guys are top of the list. I don't think Tosh is really that high. And I think Tosh Lupoi is clearly a good defensive coordinator. The Ducks defense has made some serious strides that I'll get to in a moment in the last couple of years. The last defensive coordinator job he had, though, didn't exactly end very well. And so he's a guy that has always been an elite recruiter, and that hasn't changed. We've seen that since he got to the Ducks. But after being the defensive coordinator in 2018 for Alabama, he went to the NFL where he's a defensive line coach. Like that's the position that he knows the best, and that's also a position he recruits incredibly well. We've seen that with Oregon's recruiting classes over the last couple of cycles. But for Lupoi, I don't think that if he wanted to leave Oregon, I never see his name pop up on head coaching vacancy lists, which those names don't get there by accident. They're either seriously being considered or an agent wants to put them there because he knows somebody in the media space, or both. Tosh Lupoi's name never pops up. And the names that do pop up don't do so by accident. Names also don't pop up not by accident. Like, I don't think he's someone that wants to be a head coach. He hasn't been in his career. I don't think that's suddenly something that he... Like, some guys are just... Okay, I come across a lot of coaches in the college sports space, and some of them don't want to be head coaches. I know several. I know several personally who have the resume to try to be a head coach somewhere, and I've asked them, well, would you consider that? No, I don't want to do that. Some guys are good. You know what? I'm a number two sort of guy. I'm a coordinator. I'm a coach. I'm a position. Gary Campbell made a career at Oregon. He was there for 30 years, or I think it was longer than that, as the running backs coach. I'm sure he got calls to be an offensive coordinator somewhere. Some guys, I got a good living. I like my job. I coach running backs. It's fun. So not everyone is that ambitious. So I don't think that he would leave. I think the only way Tosh Lupoi winds up not being Oregon's defensive coordinator one day is if Dan Lanning decides it's time to make a change. I don't think that time is anywhere close to coming. Now, in 2022, I was pretty critical here on the show of Lanning and Lupoi because though I understood it was year one and you didn't expect that Oregon's defense would max out its potential with those two guys in charge compared to, what they had last year or even in 2023, didn't have all their guys in there. First time Lanning was a head coach, all that. The defense should have been better. Dan Lanning was the defensive coordinator for the national champion Georgia Bulldogs. Tosh Lupoi's got a long resume, has been around. The defense in 2022 should have been better. I think we can look back now and say the personnel was definitely way off. Not at every position. You had Christian Gonzalez in there, first round pick at corner. But on the defensive line in particular, they weren't good enough. They generated, I think it was their fewest sacks in like over 2 decades. And of course, last year, within a couple of seasons, Oregon's defensive line, I described, and I think they lived up to the billing, as the best since 2014. Maybe the best that I've seen from the Ducks in my lifetime. I mean, 3 guys drafted in the first 3 rounds, including a first rounder in Derek Harmon. Pretty darn good. So, that has been an area where I think you would give Tosh Lupoi an A, is improving that particular unit. Overall in the defense, remember, I'm a tough grader. I am a tough grade. When I grade a position group, when I grade a player, I'm not handing out A's and B's like you see in high school and college nowadays. It's pretty much, it's a joke. It's a joke. I can speak as someone that went to both high school and college. It's way too easy to get an A. Way too easy. I give Tosh Lupoi a B- to assess his tenure overall. And certainly, I think he's well entrenched onto Oregon staff, and I don't think Dan Lanning is making any sort of plan to move on from him at defense coordinator. I think early on, he got a good deal of more criticism from from Duck fans writ large. I think that was kind of deserved because I thought the defense was underperforming, but it has gotten materially better. They've allowed fewer points per game in each of the last 2 seasons than they did the year before. That's progress. And that's just one example of a stat that's backing up the eye test. Oregon just had the Big Ten leader in the regular season in sacks compared to their first year when getting pressure on the quarterback was a major struggle. And that's somebody, Mateo Uyunglele is, of course, who I'm talking about. That's somebody who Oregon recruited and developed and is now probably going to be a first-round pick. That's the sort of thing that you want to see from a defense coordinator in addition to the results on the field. Now, the reason I have the grade, and I'm curious to hear what you guys all say, as low as a B minus, is the big game performance hasn't been there. And that's the only thing that's missing, but that's a pretty big thing to be missing for an entire side of the ball. You can't look at the offense in the last couple of years, and in Oregon's, aside from the Rose Bowl where everything was bad, you can't look at those games that Oregon has lost, well, the Rose Bowl and Georgia, which was game 1, and I think we can all write that one off as like, yeah, that was a difficult spot to be in there. The offense hasn't been the problem. You go back to Oregon State and Washington 2022, offense not the problem. Washington twice in 2023, offense not the problem. Ohio State, yep, they got outcoached. Just staff-wide, across the board, Oregon got outcoached. All right, happens. The Ohio State staff was really veteran and really, really good. But that's the next step. I think Tosh has been good. You'd have to give the recruiting a significantly higher grade, I think, than the overall on-field performance. That's what I expected when Lanning brought him on as Oregon's defense coordinator. I think those two are pretty tight. I don't think unless the defense really starts to fall off in the next couple of years, like I'm talking multiple years of bad results and regressing stats, unless that happens, I don't think Tosh is going anywhere as DC. So I think he's been about what I expected him to be when he was hired. He's not a scheme guru. He is a recruiter first and foremost, and I think he's recruited really well, retained talent well, production on the field's been good, and the defensive results have been better. But now when Oregon plays their biggest games of the year, defense has got to be better. That's unquestionably, I think, a really fair criticism to levy against Coach Lupoi. So this question came in from MTV Thrash 44. I don't know where you guys come up with these names, but hey, I like the question. So, question that pertains for down the road, but what do you think the chances of Achilles Smith Jr. taking over for Dante Moore in the next year or two once Moore leaves for the draft? I thought he looked the best at the spring game and has a high ceiling. Ceiling is very high. I mean, Smith is a big kid, man, and he's got a big arm. He looked poised. I was impressed. I'm with you. I thought he did some nice things, pocket mobility. He's got a little, like, he looks like Justin Herbert a little bit out there. Nobody has Herbert's arm. And, I mean, Herbert's arm begs the question how he was a 3-star recruit. I think Oregon was like his only major FBS offer. One of them coming out of high school is like Oregon and Montana. Like, guys, that was a swing and a miss. But Oregon also got on him, I think, a little bit earlier because he grew up a Duck and in Sheldon High School and whatnot. But still, like, that guy probably should have been a 5-star quarterback or at least 4-star coming out of high school. Anyway, Achilles Smith taking over. Look, this is higher. I'll apply this to Spencer's scale of agreement. This is higher than you might think. The most likely scenario where this comes to pass, in my view, is Dante Moore goes to the NFL draft, but Austin Novosad has already transferred. Those two things could 100% happen. Because if Novosad goes through this season, Dante Moore stays healthy, which is what we all really want, and he has to hit the early transfer portal window in December, then all of a sudden, we might not know about Dante Moore's NFL decision for a couple more months. And if he decides to go to the draft, well, Achilles Smith Jr., you are the most likely guy to be the Oregon quarterback that's presently on the roster. Would he be ready to play at that point in time? That's, of course, up to the coaching staff. But next year or two, I mean, when you put the 2 in there, I'm putting this at a 6.5. Because, I mean, 2027, I'd probably say Achilles Smith Jr. is the favorite to be the Oregon starting quarterback, which is an awesome thing to think about. I'm sure it'll make plenty of you Oregon fans out there feel just a little bit old, maybe a little bit more than that, because you watched his dad play. I did not. I know he was awesome, but I'm sure for my dad and plenty of you guys out there as well, or your dads, for my younger audience out there, I'm sure they'll all look at it the same way. Like, man, I feel like I was just watching his dad play Oregon football. Now all of a sudden he's got his son starting a quarterback. But I mean, dude's got all the tools. Like any quarterback coming out of high school, I'm sure he's a little bit raw and has things to work on. Impressed in the spring game, though. More poise than a lot of true freshmen have. And physically, he's there. He's just got the traits to be an elite guy at that spot. He's just got to acclimate to the college game like any college quarterback does. So, yeah, that would be the scenario where he starts next year at quarterback for the Ducks. Novosad leaves in the winter portal. Dante Moore pops, decides I'm going to the NFL draft. Then, yeah, Achilles Smith probably be the guy. But 27, I'd slot him in as the favorite right about now. Good question. I've got more good questions on today's show. I've got a flurry of questions. That happens sometimes. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Is that the way we see it? Coming up next. All right, so GoDucks777 sent this one in. And it got me thinking, as most of your questions do. YouTube comments, Twitter, become an insider, where you get priority mailbag access and a bunch of other perks too. This came in, and it goes like this. I think Oregon's defense from back in the Chip Kelly days got a bad rap. It wasn't that they were bad. They just didn't have the depth to have a rotation with no drop-off when second and third stringers jump in. I want to see the no-huddle offense with a more talented roster, top-to-bottom depth. I know we would tire anyone out on both sides of the ball if done right. So, first of all, 100%, Nick Aliotti was so incredibly important to the Chip Kelly 4-year run at Oregon. Like, vitally huge. So don't ever forget about what he did for those teams, because you're right. They did have some pretty good talent. I mean, you look at the players that came through. Terrence Mitchell was on at least one of those Chip Kelly teams. They had some other real playmakers. Deion Jordan was there back in the day. Kenny Rowe early on. Like, they had some dudes. I haven't even named them all. John Boy yet. Like, just, you can keep going down the list. So I agree that the defense was slept on then. But applying this to the second part of your question, I don't know that I'm in as strong of agreement here. Yes, the original no-huddle, up-tempo, warp-speed offense from Chip Kelly back in it was fun. There is a nostalgic part of me, which is a big part of me, quite frankly, that would love to see that sort of stuff. You know, when Mario Cristobal was the head coach, I think that, you know, he talked about tempo from time to time to kind of appeal to Oregon fans, that he understood, you know, how important it was in Oregon's rise to prominence on the national scale. Ultimately, though, it became his identity that was the focal point of the offense and the team, for better or worse. There were some good things with that. The offensive line and running backs were really good. There were some bad things with it. They ran it too much, didn't push it down the field. Now, the modern Oregon offense, I'm not saying to never use tempo, but when you watch Will Stein's offense the last couple of years, do you see a lot of, you know, warp speed tempo? Not a ton. Some. I wouldn't describe Oregon as one of the slower playing teams in all of college football. They're certainly not one of the faster ones. And I think they're kind of in the middle there, use tempo when they have to or kind of when they want to, but it's not a part fundamentally of what they do. And when you've had as much success as Will Stein has had in the last couple of years, I come down on, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, I get your point. Oregon's roster is deeper and more talented than they used to be because of the way the Ducks recruit nowadays. That's absolutely true. That doesn't mean you should go back or want to go back to a philosophy that worked back in the day for a particular staff. You can only do what you know. You can't change. But one of my best early sports takes as a college student ever was along these very lines. So Virginia lost to University of Maryland, Baltimore County, UMBC, the Golden Retrievers. They were the first ever 16 seed, or they were the first ever 1 seed to lose to a 16. And I went on my buddy's college radio show, and he asked me, does Tony Bennett, Tony Bennett, he retired now. Tony Bennett. I was confusing his name. There's Tony Bennett, the singer, and I just want to make sure I had the name. Anyway, Tony Bennett's a defensive guy that plays a bunch of slugfests. You know, he and Dana matched up in the Sweet 16 the year Virginia won it all with that Peyton Pritchard team with Kenny Wooten and Lou King. Like, that was a fun team to watch, but they were defensively driven, a lot of slugfest, not a lot of scoring, no tempo, anything like that. So my buddy asked me, does Tony Bennett need to change it up, man? I mean, they just couldn't score. They only gave up like 72 points, but they just couldn't score enough. And I said, no, absolutely not. You can't be something as a coach that you're not. You can't employ a philosophy you don't actually know and haven't, cut your teeth coaching with that particular philosophy. You can't do it. You can't fake that. Whoever you are as a coach, whoever you've learned from, that's what you are. Our football coach is Southern Utah, Delane Fitzgerald, really, really good football coach. You know what it's predicated on? Smash mouth football and running the ball. They're never going to be an air raid. He can't become an air raid coach. It's not his MO. And so, for Will Stein, you use tempo every now and then. Everybody does. They don't need to suddenly become the blur offense to have success. Back-to-back Heisman Trophy finalists at quarterback, and in the last 2 years, they've won 25 games. And as I mentioned earlier, the defense in big games, been a bit of a letdown. Only in the big games, not in the other games. They've been really, really good. But in the big games, they haven't made all the plays that they need to. And I think offensively, Will Stein's doing just fine. All right, a flurry of trivia questions here from Bud that I will attempt to answer. Some of these are a little specific. I'm here for the trivia questions, by the way. I'm a trivia junkie. Trivia and Oregon, those are two of my favorite things in the world. So, what is Oregon's overall bowl record? That is so insanely. Bowl games go back a long. I'll say 17-10. No idea. Who is Oregon's most common bowl opponent? It's got to be Boise State. Well, they might have only played them once in an actual bowl game set. No, I think it might be Ohio State. I'll go with Ohio State on that one. I have not looked up any of these answers ahead of time. I'm just attempting to guess, like all of you probably are. This has been a newer thing on the show. I'm here for it. How many coaches have led the Ducks to bowl games? I'm going to go with 8. I did think about that one before recording. 8, I think, is the answer. When was Oregon's only overtime bowl game? Overtime bowl game? I don't remember an overtime bowl game. Oh! Let me come back to that one. How many Pac-10/Pac-12 conference championships does Oregon have? Well, you had 2010, you had 2011, you had 2014, you had 2019, you had 2020, 2001 they had to have had it with Harrington, or 1 or 3. I'll go with 7, because there's probably one in the 90s that I'm missing, so I'll go with 7 there. When was Oregon's only overtime bowl game? Who went to over? When did they go to overtime? FSU, no. Texas and the Alamo, but like Mariota years, no. I can't think of that one. I'll say 2007. Oh, was the Sun Bowl in overtime? Oh, it might have been. I'm gonna go with the Sun Bowl, which I believe was 2007. So let me know how I did. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time, and until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.